Welcome back to This Week in Bevy. 0.14.2 is out this week, including fixes for UI elements, gizmos, hue mixing, and more. You can see the full list over on GitHub, which we link to on the website. Speaking of the website, this URL is in the description if you would like to read This Week in Bevy, or click on any of the links we mention. Animations get a boost this week with animation masks, a major part of a highly desired feature. We also see progress on the curves and picking working groups, as well as some 0.14.2 UI fixes. And while we won't cover performance this week in depth, we can't forget about 14.673, which opportunistically uses dense iteration for a 3.5 times speedup in hybrid parallel iteration. There are also a number of compute shaders showcases this week, including shallow water, particle life, and Nannou's new compute abstractions. Getting right into it, the lack of masking bones is one of the most commonly requested missing features in the animation graph implementation in 0.14. As of 15.0.13, support for mask groups has been implemented, which allows toggling animation effects on and off for specific groups of bones. Note that additive blending of animations is not included in this PR, although it is intended to come next. Additive blending is the feature that would allow for a humanoid walking animation that affected the legs and a separate punching animation that affected the upper body to blend both together and apply it 100% for their respectively masked affected parts. You can check out the new animation masks example to see this in action. And in 14.663, we get a fantastic new feature for allowing creating a storage buffer without needing to access the render device. This is useful for sharing the same buffers between compute and material shaders, and fixes a cow path where previously it was easier to do in a less optimal way. You can see this in action in the new ShaderStorageBuffer example, which shows how to take advantage of the new ShaderStorageBuffer asset. And systems run in parallel, but their order isn't always deterministic. The non-deterministic system order example already shows this, and in 13.950, ambiguity detection tests in CI were added. In 15.0.31, all system order ambiguities from the default plugins were removed, resulting in fewer bugs and cleaner diagnostic output. This PR in particular links back to 73.86, which itself includes a whole bunch of context, as well as additional links in the comments to other related PRs. So if you're interested in ambiguous system ordering for any reason, definitely go check this out. And a number of UI fixes were merged, especially around slicing. Some of these made it into 0.14.2, so if you've been having trouble with slicing or 9-slice scaling, definitely upgrade. In 14.990, the Texture Atlas slicer is now using a shader, which should prevent these problems from happening in the future. And in the Bevy mod picking upstreamening, we've got a couple of additional PRs this week, including picking event ordering. If you already know what this is, you'll be happy to know it will be fixed, and if you don't, you will never encounter the issue. Notably, there is a migration guide in this PR, so if you are using Bevy mod picking, and you're going to migrate to Bevy picking in 0.15, there will be a migration guide to guide you through that process. And 14.957 ignores clicks on UI nodes outside of rounded corners, which you can see in the button example, where you can no longer click on the corner of a rounded button. And finally, 14.976 introduces a new color interpolation technique using the new curve functionality to power a color curve. This allows interpolating between multiple colors and using the fancy new curve APIs. And first up in our showcases, we've got Destructible Glass, which is a prototype. Next up, implementing recursion, that is being able to break broken glass. Note that this is a demo that particularly gets destroyed by social media compression, so we'll see if this comes through in the video. And in our next showcase, we've got Meshlet screenspace-derived tangents, which shows off the work in 15.0.84, a draft PR. This is tangents derived from screen space derivatives as part of the Meshlet's viz buffer resolve, instead of pre-calculating and storing that information in a vertex buffer. This saves 16 bytes per vertex, which is quite a bit when you consider how many vertices a Meshlet application would have. And it does look like this PR already got marked as ready for review. So if you've got any Meshlet experiments, maybe go try this PR out on your Meshlets. Next up, we've got Bevy and Nannou compute shaders. This demo shows off the newly added support for compute shaders to Nannou. This is a particle system written in about a 200-line sketch. The sketch is really interesting and includes a compute shader abstraction that is somewhat similar to Bevy's material, and it's just really exciting to see Nannou's Bevy plugin rework continue to come to fruition. At this point, both projects are benefiting from this relationship, and it's just super exciting to see. Next up, we've got an implementation of marching cubes, which is implemented on the CPU in this demo, and swaps out the mesh and collision entirely. This demo usually takes 1 to 2 milliseconds to recompute the mesh of this size, which is about 32 by 32 by 32. And speaking of CPU-side computation, this is a sand simulation, which uses a particle component and entity-based sand simulation on the CPU side. Up next, we've got early progress on a new type-to-mine game. Type words to mine blocks and make it to the flag. The camera shake in this example is powered by Bevy Camera Shake. Next up, we've got grass, trees, and flowers, which is work in progress on the rendering of the grass, trees, and flowers that you see in front of you. I believe this uses a number of tools we've seen in previous weeks, but none of them were actually listed, so I'm not 100% sure, and I've chosen to not list them as well. Then we've got vehicle joints, which is progress on a vehicle physics implementation using Rapier. This code is originally from the Vehicle Joints 3 example from the Rapier repository. And here we see a self-described Pokemon-like game where weapon switching has been added. Pokeballs, in the end, will be thrown with the left hand. And Particle Life is a color-based particle simulation. A color may either attract, repel, or be neutral towards each of the other colors. However, this relation is asymmetric, so for example, blue may attract red, but red may be neutral or repel blue. This demo runs at 60 FPS with about 300,000 particles, 20,000 bounds, and about 300 max distance. The source for this one is available on GitHub, and you are seeing the YouTube video right now, so if you're interested in this, go check it out and maybe play with it a little bit. And Killer Queen is a fast-paced 4 to 10 player local multiplayer arcade-like 2D platformer inspired by the addictive arcade game Killer Queen. If you've been to an arcade bar recently, you might have seen this giant machine in stacks of 2 off in the corner. And next up we see a Bevy-themed physical card game. The goal of this game is to combine 3 types of cards in a short session to get the most points: members, crates, and techniques. Development of the project will be open sourced, and physical packs might happen one day, although currently they're only in one-off prototype stage. This shallow water simulation is a port of a spherical shallow water simulation to compute shaders with Bevy. High resolution working just fine at 60 frames per second. This one actually also has a website, so you can definitely go check this out on your own. And this is pathfinding in quote 3D. Work in progress pathfinding in 3D, which is in quotes because while sticking to a surface, it's not full 3D pathfinding. This works by building a nav mesh with different layers where each layer can have its own cost of traversal and can be one-way or traversable only on specific conditions. This is super exciting as I actually use this crate. And with that, we're into crate releases, starting off with Bevy SimpleNet v0.13. Bevy SimpleNet is a networking crate based on WebSockets. It supports native and WASM clients. In 0.13, they added an auth token for client authentication, which was the last big missing feature. They've also now removed the nightly dependency and added the ability to construct servers with a predefined AXM router. Bevy Replicon is also a crate for networking, in this case, server authoritative networking. 0.28.1 adds the ability to defer replication, the ability to enable or disable client events waiting for replication, and entity mapping when a client event is buffering. Next up, we've got Bevy Easy Config v0.2. Bevy Easy Config allows you to automatically load structs at startup from the asset folder by simply deriving the proper traits and adding it with Bevy Easy Config's plugin. Now the struct is available from anywhere in your code as a resource, and it even hot reloads. Bevy Spritesheet Animation gets its 0.4.2 release. Bevy Spritesheet Animation is a Bevy plugin for animating sprites that are backed by sprite sheets. 0.4.2 adds 3D sprites, which are now supported, both static and animated. Sprite playback can now be manually controlled if needed. For example, go to frame 3. The high-level API has been made simpler and more concise, and various optimizations have sped up playback by a factor of 3. And finally, we've got Bevy 2D Menu Mask Transition, which is a plugin for creating smooth menu transitions with customizable masks. You can see this in action here, where each menu has its own customizable transition. And that's it for this week. As always, we've got all of the pull requests that were merged this week. I'm off to RustConf this week, so if you're over at RustConf, come say hi. I'll be the person with the Party Corgi rainbow hat, and I'm also most likely the tallest person in the room. If you're going to RustConf, I'll see you there, and if not, I will see you next week for This Week in Bevy. Have a great rest of your week.